Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Jorge, for having me here today. Thank you to the organization for this wonderful event. It's actually great to see such a great turnover for people interested in the application of artificial intelligence in medicine, even more on a Saturday morning, right? So it's actually great, yeah, to see all this enthusiasm. As you will quickly see, I'm the only one of the speakers today who's not coming from academia, who is not coming from medicine, who is not coming from a technical arena. I come from the business side, and I'm here to talk to you about how we're gonna do it to have a real impact with all what we're discussing, right? The main idea of my talk today, because that was essentially what I was asking myself, how can I do it to bring something to the table that my wonderful co-speakers today haven't already discussed, right? What can I bring as a value here? So my question was, how do we do it to have a real impact? How can we do it to really make that what we're discussing here, the methodologies that we're discussing, the applications that we're discussing actually affect the vast majority of people, right? So the first question we're gonna ask ourselves is, why are we here? Why do we do what we do? Why do we develop artificial intelligence? Why do we apply it to medicine, right? And the quick question is, or the quick answer here is, we want to improve people's lives, right? This is why we do what we do. But this is kind of a broad statement, isn't it? So let's try and focus a bit more. We want to improve patients' lives. That's why we're working on medicine, right? We want to improve patients' lives. Obviously, this can be done through a variety of methodologies, through a variety of outcomes. So being a bit more precise or analyzing a bit more of possibilities, we want to improve clinicians' lives, we want to improve clinicians' research, we want to improve clinicians' outcomes. This is why we do what we do. Why I'm starting my intervention with this? Because impact is the goal. We don't do artificial intelligence, or we don't develop artificial intelligence methodologies just for the sake of doing so, just for the sake of publishing a paper, just for the sake of, I don't know, getting my doctorate. No, we do that to improve things in real life. We do it to improve people's lives. And I say this very often because I cannot imagine how often I get the following statement. Javier, we want to do some AI. We want to do AI. What does that mean? What do we want to achieve? This very often. I get calls with clients, with people that say, I want to do AI. And I honestly stay in silence because I'm hoping for that person to actually tell me what he wants to achieve, right? I want to do AI as a thing. No, we need to have an impact. We need to know why we're doing things. We need to do what the goal is of that what we're developing, right? So the following question is, what do we have to achieve to have a real meaningful impact? And the answer to that is a single thing, is growth. We need to have scale. In order for us to have a real impact, a meaningful impact, we need to achieve that what we develop actually scales, actually gets into a real practice of clinicians, actually applies to the real life of patients, and goes into a scale both nationally, internationally, the worldwide scale. Why not? We need scale. So what is this about scale? What does scale means? Scale is usually defined by something like this, by an exponentially growing graph. So it's generally showed us as massive growth in whatever metric. The usual shape of growth of the scale is actually this. So we're talking about an uneven growth in time, but essentially we're talking about growth. And growth in what? Growth in patients affected, number of hospitals that are using whatever I'm developing, number of clinicians that are putting this into their daily practice, number of clinicians that are using this on their daily life, and obviously revenue, income that I'm generating for the hospital, for the clinician, for the patients, for the company, whatever it is, right? But we need that scale. Beyond that scale, or if we go whatever but if we go beyond a certain threshold, and it's obviously very theoretical, if we go beyond a certain threshold, we won't have a real impact. If we stay, in these initial areas here, in these initial growth areas, at the very beginning of the graph, at the very left side of the graph, we will not have a real impact. We will stay in the theoretical arena. We will stay in the research arena. It is essential. It is very important. I'm not saying the contrary. I'm saying that what we mean is to end at some point have a real impact, we need to go above that threshold. We need to find a way that our innovation finds a way into the market, finds a way into the real life. Here it's great that someone in the audience just placed a very good question and to the former speaker, to Jesus, said, how do we bring this to reality, right? How do we do it? And Jesus was saying, hey, that's another business. That's something else. And he's totally right. Usually, where this research ends, it's in a sort of a pilot, experiment, a research, right? But it's different to do research than to do innovation. It's a different thing. Innovation means to get that to the market. It means to get the results of research into real applications, into real life. And as he said very correctly, that's a matter of many different things. It's a conjunction of many different factors that we need to take into account and that we need to measure. And obviously that we need to factor in when we start our innovation, when we start our research, when we start whatever activity we want, right? But if we want to have that impact, we need to go beyond this. We need to go beyond pilots. We need to go beyond experiments. So obviously, the next question, or the next factor, if we want to make this real change through scale, is how do I do it? How do I actually make this happen, right? How do I actually make that work? The only answer to this, so the only answer to the question of how do I scale research into innovation, how do I bring a theoretical idea or an idea in a paper to reality, is through industrializing it, transforming it into a company, transforming it into an enterprise, a startup, however you want to call it. But that's the only way of scaling it. Through collaboration with private entities, with public entities, but in general, through the creation of an entity that grows. That's the only answer that we have. In order to do that, we have three main components of scale. That would be value proposition, a business model, and an efficient use of capital. And don't worry, we're going to go through the three of them. I know these are very general concepts and very heterogeneous concepts, but they're essential, right? We cannot build something that scales without actually bringing a value to the table. We cannot build a company that scales without a solid business model. We cannot build a company that scales without using the money we have efficiently. So let's go to the first point here, which is building a solid value proposition. What is a value proposition? Any ideas? What is a value proposition? A value proposition is essentially finding something that hasn't been solved and solving it. Finding a need in the market that hasn't been unveiled and solving it. Some of you will probably think you can also create a need. That's very usual. Yes, you can create. And just think whether 10 years ago you needed a company like Glovo, for example, in your lives. You now need it, right? So you can create needs. But in essential, it's identifying something that people want and solving it, right? In our field, in medicine, it can be an untreated disease. It can be a need on a daily work of clinicians. It can be a need on the daily work of a pharmaceutical company. It can be a need in the daily work of a researcher, whatever it is, but we need to find that and solve it. Solve it in a way that we can add value to that user, to that person who is experiencing the need, the problem, right? So once we have found it, that's the essentials of finding a problem and solving it, we need to build a sustainable business model. And this is important. And I've bolded here the word sustainable. Why? Because I can make a few chips, a few euros selling whatever. But what I need to do is something that grows, remember, that scales, that holds. I need something that generates a solid model, something that works not just for a couple of days, not just for a couple of weeks, not just for one interaction. It has to work forever. It has to work solidly, right? So we need a sustainable way of generating a business model. Now, the next question is obviously, what on earth is a business model? What is a business model? A business model works on the basis of what we just described, finding a value proposition, problem and a solution. We've got the problem, we've got the solution. What about the business model? The business model is very simple, and it's the essentials of finding how we turn that into a flow of value and money. How do I make that my value proposition, my solution to a problem, starts generating money? Money for who? Money for me. That's real. I'm bringing the solution to the market, I'm generating an income, right? And this flow is essential, and I'm just joking here obviously about the money issue, but it is essential. We need economics to work. If we don't find the economics for whatever we present, it's simply not going to work. Or maybe it is going to work, but it's probably going to stay on the shelf. It's probably never going to get into the actual lives of patients. So what's the point if we cannot apply it? Right? It has a lot of value, but it doesn't generate the revenue. So we need to find a way that solution to our problem generates the revenue. And this is particularly difficult in healthcare. Why is it difficult in healthcare? Healthcare is a sector that is usually not really contaminated by business, if you want. Healthcare is a sector that is non-profit in its essential, right? We want to produce a service to the citizens, to patients. We don't want to charge them for that service. That's the essential of healthcare, right? So in this context, it's very difficult to find a way of monetizing an idea, a way of generating revenue for many reasons. First of all, there is less resources than in other sectors. And we can find this in many areas. Is there an excess of money in hospitals? No. Is there an excess of public fundings from the administrations? No. Is there an excess of funding within the most announced next generation funds? No. A few data here. Do you know how many millions healthcare is getting in Spain from the next generation funds? 1,900 million, so 1.9 billion or so. Sounds like a lot of money, right? Automotive industry, 26 billion. Doesn't sound right, eh? Doesn't sound right. So there is not too much money in the sector. There is not too much willingness to pay. There is not too much ideology of paying in the healthcare sector, and there's not many entities that can actually pay. So when we need to find a business model, we need to ask ourselves who is able to pay and who is willing to pay. Who is the person, entity, whatever, that is going to pay for my solution? That's the main question we need to solve at this stage of finding that business model, right? Who is the entity that's going to... And my only advice here, and honestly, my only advice to find that the answer to that question is follow the money. Where the money is in the sector, you will find people able and willing to pay for your solution. Once we have found a way of selling our solution into the market, once we have found a way of generating a revenue that's sustainable, we need to do something that's a bit more complex, which is the efficient use of capital, or using our capital efficiently. And here again, I'm talking about money. And sorry, I'm a business person. Gotta talk about money. So using capital efficiently is essentially that we get funding, public funding, investors' money, money from our clients, I don't care, whatever money it is, and we use it wisely. Let me show you what that exactly means. This super elaborated graph that I've put here for you guys represents the revenue of a company, right? Super complex. This can be 100 euros, or if you prefer, it can be 100 million. It's probably more fun. This is the expenses of a company, right? Los gastos, ¿no? The recurring expenses of a company. Does it look well? What do you think? Good? Not too good? It depends, right? Thank you, that's a good answer. So let's focus on this point at number 2. Let's focus on that point. Is this company making money? No. Clear answer. The company is not making money, right? But is this company using its capital right, efficiently? I'll show you why. This is the growth in expenses. This little red triangle here is the growth in expenses of the company. And this green triangle here is the growth in revenue. Is the company using its capital right? Is the company using whatever it's spending the money in correctly? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Whatever money they had in point number 0 at the very beginning of our timeline, they have used it wisely because they've achieved a great growth of customers, of patients, of money, whatever it is, little capital. This is efficient use of capital, efficient use of money. And this is the very essential of what in business we usually call scalability. Scalability, the ability to scale, right? And again, going to the very principles of this talk today, if we want to make an impact, we need scale. Therefore, we need scalability, efficient use of capital, right? So these are the three main, the three essentials of creating something that scales, of creating a company that scales, a product that scales, a value, an idea that scales. Let me give you an example, and let me, if you allow me, to use my own company for that purpose. I was also asked by Jorge and the organization to give you a brief insight of what we do at IOMED, and I'm going to use that to help you guys understand with an example exactly how we suggest, or how it's possible to suggest these three main components of scale, right? So IOMED is a company that we founded in Barcelona 5 years ago. We have offices in Barcelona at the moment, and we are expanding, working with hospitals throughout Spain, and increasingly also in Portugal, in Italy, in Great Britain, and growing international steadily, right? Our company essentially has one purpose, which is bringing or allowing hospitals to create real-world data at scale, to produce real-world data at scale. And thank you, Jesus, because you did a great introduction to our company. One of the main bottlenecks is to get access to data, right? One of the main bottlenecks when it comes to actually using AI or actually testing AI or whatever it is around our own AI applications, we need a lot of data. And it's rough to get access to that data. It's very difficult to get access to data. We've got heterogeneity, we've got unstructured sources, we've got different languages. Think about the Basque, Catalan, think about English, Portuguese, whatever you want. We have different healthcare systems. We've got different policies from hospital to hospital. We've got different ideologies, even clinician to clinician. So it's difficult to access data, isn't it? It's extremely difficult. So our company helps hospitals produce massive databases of clinical data. We are nowadays working with 20-ish hospitals in Spain, and each one of those has been creating millions and millions and millions of records of patients, fully structured through artificial intelligence. We use natural language processing to ensure that all of what is being produced in those hospitals in terms of data is fully structured, has exactly the same structure, has exactly the same parameters, and can be extracted in the same way. Let me show you exactly how that works. This is how usually data looks like in an electronic health record in a hospital, right? It's a very simple, randomly invented medical record of a patient that has some pain since yesterday, has some persisting pain apparently, has been treating this unsuccessfully, right? So this is how an electronic health record looks like in a hospital. And I think you are more familiar with that than me. You've seen more of that than me. So as you can see, this is completely unstructured. This is very difficult for us to extract, or absolutely impossible actually for us to extract and give to Jesus for him to actually run through his algorithms in AI application, right? So the first thing that our natural language processing does is reading through this, literally reading through this, and obviously when I say this, it's millions and millions of records, but reading through that and identifying what is clinically relevant. Identifying what it is, regardless of whether it is correctly spelled or not. And please check that obviously pain is wrongly written and so on, right? So there is spelling mistakes, whatever it is. I mean, it's very useful, very usual, and very common. We find those, our natural language processing systems identify those terms, those words, extract them. So far, so good, but so useless. Language is more complex than finding words. It's not about identifying words in a text. That's kids play, right? We need to go a bit beyond that. Jesus is smiling here. We need to go a bit beyond that. We need to find relations between those words. We need to understand how those terms relate to each other, how that language is actually meant. Language is not just a random split of words, right? It is a relationship between those words, where they are placed, how they are placed in the text, right? So the next step our algorithm in natural language processing has to do is understanding how those terms relate to each other. For example, let's take pain. Where is the pain taking place? In the left arm. We need to identify that location relationship. Temporal relationship. When, did this pain begin? Yesterday. It has a persistence, so it has an additional characteristic. It is persistent, and it has persisted until this morning. So it has an additional temporary component here. You see what I mean? We need to understand the language, not find the words. Understand the language, understand how those words relate to each other. And even more, we need to give those words or those relationships a value. When, temporality, negation, for example, this improvement that we were showing here, it is not a positive improvement, it's a negative one. It is without improvement that he has been treating his pain with whatever drug here, right? So we need to understand the words, we need to understand the relationship between the words, we need to understand the value of that relationship, and so many other things. At the end of the day, what we create is a cloud of relationship between the different words. Just to give you a quick data, out of such a small text like this one, we can extract over 300 data points that point out relationship, meanings, and so on. Each one of those relationships, each one of those terms, meanings, whatever it is then coded to a standard, such as ICD-10, IOMED. You don't need to know the specifics, but it's basically codes, right? So we produce a lot of codes, and out of that text, we produce a giant table with information. And that's the data that Jesus and his team will then consume for whatever research they need to undergo, right? Now imagine this as at scale. In Spain, we have 300 million yearly medical consultations, and we are a small country compared to others, right? 300 million. Imagine 300 million consultations, electronic consultations, for the past 10 years and the coming years, all of them fully structured with a system like this. You produce solid networks of data. You produce something that has an unbelievable value, right? So this is exactly what we do. We produce that data together with hospitals within, let's say, within their databases. Within our system, every hospital holds its own data. It's completely transparent. Those hospitals are responsible for their own data. Data is anonymized. We comply with absolutely every regulation in terms of data protection, which is very important, but obviously we do. So now, let's look at the value proposition. The value proposition at IOMED is very simple. We want to facilitate researchers the automated and scalable access to real-world data. That's the idea. Real-world data, it's what we extract from the medical records, what we produce together with hospitals. We want to facilitate you guys in the medical field an access that is automated, a collection that is automated of those data for your research projects, for your studies, for your trials, for your AI applications, for whatever you want. We want to facilitate you that access. That is our value proposition. We found a need, and Jesus explained that need for me today. We don't have access to data. Help. We brought a solution with innovation, with technology, and we are trying to scale that solution. So in order to scale that solution, the second component of scaling, remember, business model. We need to create something that produces revenue. Luckily for me, IOMED is already producing revenue, so I get a salary and so on. And in that sense, we offer research software to you guys, to clinicians, to researchers in general, right? So we offer interfaces, programs, software that allows you to use that data. We've got several pieces of software, some oriented towards observational studies, some oriented towards clinical trials, some oriented to random data extraction for AI projects, for example, some oriented to feasibility studies, epidemiological studies, ecological studies, you name it. We've got several pieces of software offered to the community, to the researchers, to companies, for those researchers, those companies, that community to pay for the access to this kind of data. All of that, of course, complying with the law again, but generating in that sense an interesting revenue model, an interesting business model, right? So here we found the second piece, which is how do we monetize, how do we generate revenue out of that idea, out of that software that we have produced. And finally, our efficient use of capital, and this is, and sorry for putting the same graph again, but it's very simple to explain. If we offer software and we don't offer services, we offer a software, we don't have what we call a marginal cost. That means we do not have an extra cost for every unit of software we sell. Jesus buys me a license to my software. I don't need to pay anyone for that. I don't need to go through any expense, through any additional expense. We don't generate an expense for that licenses, right? So I can scale my business, I can grow my business without having extra expenses. That's also an efficient use of capital, right? So I've tried to give you an example on how exactly the use of capital works in that sense, how the value proposition and the business model can help us create something that scales, but there is an additional component that I have not mentioned yet, and that is equally important, and without whom we simply can't build anything that grows, which is the environment. The environment in which we live and work, actually, the environment in which we build our companies, our initiatives, our AI projects, our research institutes. What is the environment that we have in our surroundings? That's why I stated towards a functioning environment. But actually, the correct statement here is, are we moving towards a functioning environment? It's actually a question. Are we moving to that functioning environment that is functional for companies, that is functional for hospitals, that is functional for you guys as talented people, for researchers, and so on? Are we moving to an environment that is sustainable for companies? And there we have many components, but I want to highlight mainly 4 of those. And I want to start with talent. Talent as a resource, not talent as a happy idea, but talent as a resource. In order to have a functioning environment, we need working talent. We need people that know what they're doing. We need to have bright minds. That's why it's so. What I'm so excited about being here today. You guys are an example for that. You guys are an example for that. Clinicians interested in AI, cross-functional interactions with engineers, with research people. That is where value lies. In that sense, I'm pretty confident that in our environment, talent is certainly not a problem, is certainly not a lack. So in that sense, more than check. Talent, in that sense, in Spain at least, or in our immediate environment, is great. Then we've got the industrial side. When I state industry, I want to, place this in the broadest of senses. So basically, all the companies, right? And here, what we need to find, or what we need to have, is an industry that's open to innovation. What does an industry or a company see when we offer innovation? What do they see in a big company? Think about a big pharma company, for example. What do they see when we offer innovation? When we offer a value proposition that is new? They see risk. They see risk. Risk of failure. Risk of financial risk, for example, spending in something that doesn't work. They see risk all in all together. So we need an industry that is risk welcoming, that is not risk averse. We need an industry that wants to assume risk. We need an industry that wants to place into risk, because without risk, there is zero innovation. Absolutely impossible. right? So we need an industry that in that sense is functioning. Are we there? No. No, we're not. Certainly not. We need more risk tolerance in our industry. And I'm certainly not talking about the pharmaceutical industry only. I'm talking in the industry as a whole, right? The conglomerate of companies in our surroundings that have the power to finance projects, that have the power to purchase software, that have the power to support researchers and so on. We need more risk at those companies in the industry, right? We're moving the right direction. Certainly, we can see even a growing investment into innovation, but we need more tolerance to risk in that sense. And then we've got hospitals as an additional component. Hospitals are a key player when we're talking about deploying artificial intelligence in healthcare, obviously, right? That's what healthcare happens as a whole, right? Or in its major part, I guess. So hospitals have a key role in here. What do we need from hospitals, or what do we need as, let's say, as them, as part of the environment to act? What do we need from hospitals? We need them, again, to have a welcome to risk, but also we need to have them the correct tools to evaluate what is being offered to the hospitals. And this is a big problem right now, because hospitals, where there is a lot of medical talent, a huge amount of medical talent, there is still quite a lack of knowledge in certain areas, particularly in cutting-edge technologies, so particularly in AI and similar, right? So we need to increase the conjunction between talent, technical talent, let's say, engineering talent, and that's a wonderful reflection that Jesus did at the end of his presentation. The conjunction between engineering talent and medical talent within hospitals. We need them to have the tools to understand, to evaluate what's going on around them and what is of value and what is not of value that's being proposed to them. And finally, we've got all the public administration and public systems where things are moving in the right direction, but yet we are at the very, very beginnings in terms of the administrations. And here I can ask a couple of questions you probably know better than me, but is it easy to work with an administration? I hear no here. Is it easy for an administration to fund your project? No. Is it easy to sell something to administration? No, it isn't. We need an administration that is open to catch innovation. We need an administration that is open, that is permeable, to understand what small companies are doing and offering an opportunity for small companies to go and actually sell to the administration. How long does it take to win a public tender, concurso público, a public tender, for the administration to actually sell them something? It can take years. A small company cannot work like that. It's impossible. It's impossible. That is not designed for small, quick, fast, innovative companies. We need to change those things. We need to find those channels. But most importantly, out of what I want to take as a takeaway of this point of environment that I've shown you, is the interaction between these four aspects. We need these four elements here: human resources, industry, hospitals, and administration, to interact efficiently among them, have a network of interaction that actually works in the adoption of technology, in the adoption of innovation, in order for us to be able to work and therefore scale, right? Again, if the environment doesn't work, it's difficult that we place companies that scale. If there are not companies that scale or projects that scale, we cannot generate an impact for the patients, we cannot generate an impact for society, and if we can't, what's the point, right? So let's open that debate. Let's have whatever questions you have, guys, for this point and for these aspects about growth, scale, and impact. Happy to answer those. Here are my contact details as well. Happy to welcome any questions about you for you guys. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for the organization for having me today. Thank you so much. Questions?
I wanted to ask you about your patients' healthcare data management processes for your product. Imagine you collect a large amount of data, but in that data, there's also stored phone numbers. Well, healthcare data is sensible by definition. Oh, thank you. And this is of special relevance not in this market where insurance not limited in basis of the pathological background of any individual, but in other places, systems, it is. Then how does your company manage all this problem in a daily basis?
Sure. That's a very good question and a very important one. So I have two answers for you. First one is the nature of data itself. So the kind of data that we have in our databases. It's fully anonymized in a sense that before we process data, before anything goes through our NLP, anything goes through our algorithms, data is fully cleaned up. We erase phone numbers, postal codes, names, surnames, nicknames, email addresses, mail addresses, street addresses, whatever you find in that.
Is it codified or anonymized?
No, that data is fully erased. It's not hashed. It's erased.
So you cannot do longitudinal follow-up.
Yes, you can, because you can work on. So we do have an identifier for the patient itself and for the temporality.
So the identifier is back traceable.
Sorry?
The identifier is back traceable.
Not by us. In order for it to be fully anonymous, you cannot have it being back traceable. So you cannot have a reverse anonymization being possible. In that sense, our process of anonymization is full. We dissociate completely the original identity of the patient from the identity that we have in our databases. In that sense, it is true that you cannot identify individuals, but it's also true that in most of the use cases in recent clinical research that we apply for, you don't really need individuals to be identified. You need populations, you need statisticals. So you don't really need the names of the people, you don't need to identify names of people. So that's the first part of how we deal with data. But the second part is, and it's equally important, our databases are never stored. Let's say, centralizedly under our management. Our databases live within the hospitals. We don't have data at IOMED, which is quite shocking, right? We have processed over 300 million of medical records already, and we have zero data ourselves. We have that data distributed among the different hospitals that work with us. And this is essential because legislation enforces that the one who controls data has to be the hospital. We cannot control that data, and we don't want to. So again, answering your question, how do we manage data? We dissociate and clean data before processing it, and we store all that data within hospitals. Essentials here. But thank you for that question. It's a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Jesus.
So thank you for the talk. I really like it. So just going back to this point of the data belong to the hospitals. So somehow the data value of your business model somehow for me is somehow critical, because how many of these hospitals in 3 years time they will be telling you, hey, the data we are not storing anymore, or this kind of things. I mean, this is super high risk. I see that like a no. So you get like a permanent support of next 20 years to store my. I mean, this sounds to me very, very complex.
It is complex. So we need to ensure that the value to the hospitals stay at the very forefront of our value proposition. So the key point here is that we can retain hospitals to participate with us. We cannot force them to participate with us, or we cannot force them to stay with us once they have started to work with us. So that is very right. It is also right that it would be shocking for a hospital to stop working with a company like us, in the sense that we are not charging hospitals to participate in our technology. So we do not generate revenue from hospitals. We do not ask for money from hospitals. We bring a lot of research to the hospitals that work with us, and we guarantee full compliance with data protection regulations, right? Mm-hmm. So the essential here is that we encourage hospitals to stay with us beyond 2-3 years. And the only way of doing that is showing that we have value, showing that the projects that we bring, the studies, the trials, and so on, generate the value for the hospital, for the clinicians, and for the patients. Again, impact.
So to me, the very important of these initiatives is the capability to follow up patients 20 years, these kind of things. So what is the oldest data set you already have access?
The oldest data point I have stems from 1993. Wow. Quite a lot.
Before the company, no?
Way before the company. Yes, 1993. That's the oldest data point we have in our databases. The average, I would say, has a longitudinal age of roughly 10, 11 years, roughly, in our data set. So you can already perform studies with us that go back 10 years. That's absolutely no problem. We can still produce cohorts of patients of over 50, 60,000 patients.
Okay, first of all, I liked the flow of presentation of this morning, starting from general topic to go specific scientific things and finishing with that. And second, congratulations for the IOMED initiative, and very glad you have a salary, because just building a startup in that context and make revenue of that, this is a big thing. I have two questions regarding about that. I understood that so you are producing this real-world data, clean, accessible, standardized. This data is stored in hospital, so you have collaboration with hospitals to get access, and you provide these channels to researchers for sharing this data. My first question is, who is establishing the requirements on who can access to this data, the company or the hospital? And my second question is regarding the scalability. Are you aware of those data lake initiatives that they are starting in regions and different places?
Sure. So to the first question, always the hospital. Always the hospital. IOMED has no authority, legal or otherwise, moral, ethical, whatever you call it, to authorize access to data. It's always the hospital, always. To the second question, yes, I am aware of those data lake initiatives. I wish them very good luck, but I believe equally to zero on that. Basically because the amount of data that is wishing to be collected in those initiatives is huge. It is not really operative to work with that in a centralized environment, even if it's a region. So even if we talk about a region like the Basque Country, or we talk about Catalonia, or we talk about Madrid, the three regions have these same initiatives, but it's not operative. You cannot centralize all that data outside of the network, or outside of the hospitals that produce it. It's very unlikely that produces strong results beyond epidemiological analysis, which is important, is very important. But if we want to go beyond that, we need simply deeper data. And in order to achieve deeper data, we need to distribute the data weight on different nodes, on different areas. In that sense, the way we see it is a great initiative. It's an initiative that it can even, let's say, make us scale faster, because it can help us access to more data in a more scalable way. But it's an initiative that lacks a bit of planning in that sense. So we're not really strong believers of those initiatives, mainly from a technical point of view, not so much about the potential of that, which is great, but mostly of an executional point of view. Thanks for that question.
Thank you.
There's a question from YouTube first that they've been waiting. The question is whether you work with hospitals in the Basque Country already or not.
That's a good one. Yes, we do. We work. We have a great initiative with Biocruces, but we do not work as a whole with Osakidetza to the level we would like to work with you guys. So please go to your hospitals, talk about us.
Quería hacer justo esa misma pregunta. Así que no sé.
Good morning,
Morning.
Javier. Massive thank you for bringing to us the business perspective. Sometimes in science we lack on these competences. It has been phenomenal. And I have two questions for you. First, if you, as mentioned before, don't charge hospitals, who is covering your incomes? And secondly, how do you build trust in your technology if in order to protect it, you can't really publish it 100%? Thank you.
Two very good points. To the first one, the pieces of software that we produce as, let's say, let me basically scroll back up here, how we do this. So this is the basic business model here at IOMED. So we develop and we don't charge the lower, let's say, layer here, which are the hospitals, where we produce the data with them, right? So this is fully collaborative, zero cost. But up here, we have developed a series of windows, if you want. These are interfaces, software interfaces, that allow researchers to access that data. That's where we generate our revenue. That's where we generate our income, right? So there are researchers that have grants, that have budgets. There are companies that are acting as researchers or sponsors. We charge these players here for the use of these windows of this software to access our data. Now, to your second question, how do we build trust in our technology? We can publish on the technology, and we have. We have several papers on NLP. We are developing cutting-edge technology on clinical NLP. We have, in words of our wonderful Chief Technology Officer, we already have the biggest language clinical language model that exists on the Spanish language. I encourage you to look for this publishing, which is great in natural language processing. Last one, I think, was in one of the congresses here at the Sociedad Española de Procesamiento de Lenguaje Natural. So yes, there is publishing on our end, mostly on the technical side. That's on the one hand, but on the other hand, we encourage, and that I want to thank Jorge for the approach, because we encourage an approach that's completely the opposite to the black box. We encourage the glass box approach, right? We encourage our hospitals and our partners to look deep into how we do what we do. We offer a full view on a full audit on how data moves from one point to the other, how it is processed. We don't hide anything. We think there is no point in hiding it. We don't think a hospital is going to copy our technology from one day to the other. So we are happy to show them how it works. We're happy to open our boxes and show how things work in there. So that's how we build trust. At the end of the day, trust can be generated certainly through publications, but trust is mainly generated through healthy relationships with your partners. That's the key point.
Okay, thank you for your talk. I found it really very interesting. And my question is, you were talking about the difficulties with working with the public administration, and my first question is, do you think the first path to scale the AI in this country, in Spain, would be first in the private industry rather than in the public administration? And if you found, and if yes, if you found the public administration or the scaling here in Spain more difficult than in other countries.
To your last question, no, it is equally difficult in other countries. Okay. So no, we don't have a particular problem there. At least in Europe, our experience outside of Europe is limited, but within Europe, I can tell you it's not more complicated in Spain than it is in other countries. To your first question, most of in this I want to say very clearly, 90% of the members of our data federation, of our data hospital network, is public. They're public hospitals. So our experience in scaling is mainly in the public arena. Still, my advice is always look for someone else who pays. Okay. Don't ask the public entity to pay. Mm-hmm. It just makes scaling absolutely impossible. Look for a different payer. You can still scale within the public arena, but find someone else to pay. Okay. Thank you.
Finally, you have explained that your model is on a glass box, or at least you advocate for transparency, but is any of your products open source, or at least externally auditable, independently if whether inside your product you use openly licensed libraries or whatever?
Mhm. There are components that we are putting on the open source arena, but my general answer has to be no. We're still a for-profit company, so that glass box approach goes more towards our partners who can audit our processes, but we're still very much on the arena of making sure that our IP is secured and our IP is, fully private in that sense. We do have some components that are open source, happy to contribute, but that's not the essentials of our technology. Sure.
If there are no more questions, thank you, Javier.
Thank you, guys.